Every year, billions are spent trying to make farmland more productive. Bigger tractors, more fertilizer, more chemicals, more technology. Yet on the steep hills of northern Britain, farmers have quietly ignored much of that advice. For nearly 300 years, no fences across the high ground, no fresh reseeding, no chasing the newest input, just sheep, grass, stone, and rain. Managed almost exactly the way it was managed when their great-great-grandparents did it. And somehow, their farms are still standing, not thriving in the way a shareholder report would define thriving, but standing, producing food from land so steep, so wet, and so thin-soiled that almost nothing else grown there survives. What do they know that modern agriculture still struggles to understand? The answer isn't hidden inside a laboratory. It's written across the hills themselves. Picture a morning in the Lake District, sometime in the 1700s, cold enough that breath hangs in the air. Before the sun clears the ridgeline, dry stone walls running up the fellside, built without mortar, stacked stone on stone, by hands that knew exactly how a wall holds itself together, on a slope that wants to slide. Sheep moving through mist that hasn't lifted yet, gray shapes against gray rock, grazing ground too steep for a tractor to ever cross. A family that has worked this same fellside for generations already, and will work it for generations more. The conditions here should make farming nearly impossible. 60 inches of rain some years. Growing seasons cut short by altitude. Soil so thin in places that bedrock shows through the turf. Winters that kill anything, not built for the cold. And yet generations survived here. Not just survived, stayed. Raised children here. Buried parents here. Handed the same hillside to the next pair of hands. How? Today's thinking about agriculture runs on a different assumption. Bigger farms, bigger machines, maximum production per acre, heavy fertilizer, constant expansion, higher stocking density. This approach became dominant for understandable reasons. After the Second World War, Britain came close enough to food shortage that produce more at any cost stopped sounding like a slogan and started sounding like survival. Subsidies rewarded output. Machinery scaled up what one farmer could physically manage. Chemical fertilizer meant a field no longer needed years of recovery to stay productive. For flat, deep-soiled lowland, this approach delivered exactly what it promised. Yields climbed for decades, but the uplands were never flat, never deep-soiled, never built for that model in the first place. So the question the hills keep asking is quieter and harder to answer with a spreadsheet. What happens when efficiency begins destroying the very land that feeds us? The first thing to understand about hill farming isn't a trick. It's a philosophy built into a practice called hefting. For over 300 years, hill flocks in Cumbria, the Pennines, Wales, and the Scottish Highlands have grazed common land without fences. A ewe learns her patch of hillside from her mother. She teaches it to her own lambs. Generation after generation, the flock stays where it belongs, without a single boundary post. The Lake District's hefted flocks were part of why the region was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In 2017, OA recognized for a farming tradition built on local sheep breeds, common grazing, and farmers working independently, but never entirely alone. James Banks, who farms in Matterdale, on land his family has worked for over 600 years, put it plainly in his memoir, The Shepherd's Life. This is a life and a landscape where a person can become as hefted to the ground as the sheep are. Work with the land, never force it. Every hill has limits, a stocking rate it can carry, without the grass giving out and the topsoil going with it. Grass recovers if it's given time. Animals, managed well, can improve the land they graze on, rather than strip it bare. Healthy soil, held for the long term, is worth more than one extra harvest taken now. None of this was written down in an agricultural textbook. When it started, it was carried in practice, farm to farm, parent to child, season after season. This isn't old-fashioned. It's wisdom that simply never needed a peer-reviewed paper to be true. Here is where it gets interesting. In 1997, 3 neighboring farmers in the hills of mid-Wales, in a valley called Pontbryn, started doing something practical. Their land was steep, exposed, and hard on their flocks, so they planted hedges and shelter belts, trees in rows across the slope. mainly to give their sheep somewhere to get out of the wind. By 2001, 7 more farms had joined them, 10 farming families, managing about 1,000 hectares together. Then, in 2001, something unexpected happened. The director of Coed Cymru, the Welsh woodland charity supporting the project, was walking across one of the farms. During heavy rain, he watched water running downhill, across the grazed pasture and disappearing the moment it reached the new tree belts. The farmers told him they'd noticed the same thing themselves. That observation turned into a major research program. The Center for Ecology and Hydrology came to measure what was happening and found that water infiltrated the soil beneath the tree belts up to 60 times faster than the open, grazed pasture just 10 meters away. One modeling study estimated that reforesting just 5% of an upland landscape could reduce flood peaks by close to 30%. Roger Jukes, one of the original Pontbryn farmers, later reflected that although he and his neighbors had always known each other as friends, it wasn't until 1997 that they sat down together to think seriously about what was happening to their way of farming and started changing it. They weren't trying to publish a paper. They were trying to keep sheep warm and dry on a bad afternoon. Elsewhere, at Rothamsted Research's North Wyke Farm Platform in Devon, scientists studying rotational grazing moving livestock between paddocks rather than leaving them on one stretch of ground continuously found it increased the rate at which organic matter builds back up in the soil compared to continuous grazing on the same land. Rotational grazing, deliberate rest periods for grass, shelter belts across exposed slopes, livestock and land managed as one connected system. None of this is new to a hill farmer. It's simply what 3 centuries of paying close attention to a difficult hillside eventually teaches a family to do. The twist is a satisfying one. Without pretending, every old method beats every new one. Modern research keeps arriving at conclusions the hills already knew. Now consider the other side of that story. Across England and Wales, soil degradation, the loss of organic matter, compaction from heavy machinery, and erosion from bare, exposed ground is estimated to cost the economy somewhere between 900 million and £1.5 billion every single year. Intensive cultivation has caused arable soils in parts of the UK to lose somewhere between 40 and 60% of their original organic carbon. Damaged, compacted soil holds less water. Water that soil can't absorb has to go somewhere, and increasingly, that somewhere is downstream, into towns and villages that never used to flood. The Environment Agency has linked soil degradation directly to rising flood risk in exactly the kind of landscape that upland shelter belts were quietly built to prevent. Nature always sends the bill eventually. It doesn't send it to the field that caused the problem. It sends it downstream to a kitchen floor under 6 inches of water, 100 miles away, long after anyone remembers which decision led there. This story isn't really about sheep. It's about people, patience, respect for a system bigger than one season's balance sheet, long-term thinking in a world built around quarterly results, understanding that not everything can be optimized without a consequence. Arriving later, somewhere you weren't looking, the families who've farmed Britain's hills for 3 centuries never had the vocabulary of soil carbon or infiltration rates or ecosystem services. They had something simpler. They had to live on the same ground they were farming and hand it to children who would have to live there too. That single fact disciplined every decision in a way that no subsidy scheme has ever quite managed to replicate. Perhaps the greatest lesson hidden among Britain's hills isn't how to raise sheep, it's how to think. Because while technology changes every decade, the land still rewards the same people it rewarded 300 years ago, those willing to listen before they try to conquer it. Sometimes progress isn't about discovering something new. It's about finally understanding what never stopped working. New stories every week on Deep Furrow.